Hello and welcome to Back of the Net. In August, AFC Bournemouth are going to be embarking on their 6th Premier League season, much to the delight of Cherries fans across the globe. It's the richest league in football, has the most media coverage and is home to some of the world's greatest footballers. It also has the wealthiest owners and stadia that are out of this world. TV audiences are huge, the financial rewards for players and clubs are life-changing, and every stadium is often sold out, from the near 80,000 capacity at Old Trafford, Manchester, to the... Sorry, that can't be right. 11,700 at Dean Court, Bournemouth. How can that be a Premier League stadium? Oh, don't worry. We know what it's like when we see Premier League fans on Twitter talking about our ground. We've seen these comments all before. We're almost numb to them. Alas, we get them every week. They're not even a good put down anymore. But the questions do remain. Why is it so small? Are there plans to redevelop? Who owns the ground? And why don't they at least fill the corners in? Let me fill you in about our brief history inside 100 seconds. So Bournemouth, which was called a number of different names before the AFC prefix, most involving the name Boscombe, has always been a small club in a picturesque tourist area, a location where the beaches come first and the football team has often come second, third, or maybe even fourth. Dean Court, as most Boscombe fans affectionately call it, has been our home for over 100 years, since 1910 in fact, when the Cooper Dean family made the site available, hence the name Dean Court. In the 90s, the facilities were decrepit, parts of the ground were crumbling away and were fenced off due to safety concerns. So, in 2000-2001, we built a new ground where they turned the pitch 90 degrees and it boasted 3 new permanent stands, which at the time was state-of-the-art compared to its predecessor, with decent hospitality facilities, bigger changing rooms, more corporate boxes and a chance for the club to monetise the facility on not just match days. So as a club that had an attendance that hovered between 3,000 and 4,000, the stadium's new capacity was 9,600, more than enough for the new generation of Cherries fans in the noughties. Plus, there was the option, of course, of increasing that capacity with a 4th end. At the time, we were floating around the lower 2 divisions, so money wasn't exactly flowing through the door. And in the mid-noughties, our lack of cash flow caught up with us, and Cherries had more financial problems. Therefore, in 2005, Dean Court was sold for around 3.8 million to London-based property firm Structure Dean, who were then to lease it back, thus giving the Cherries a chance to stave off the receivers. This arrangement has never changed. Bournemouth still do not own the ground, and despite a number of conversations between both parties, an agreement has never been reached to buy it back. With new investment coming into the club towards the end of 2011 by the way of our still current owner Maxim Demin, the focus was always on improving the club on the pitch, and with Eddie Howe also returning to the club that he once plied his trade at, all the ducks were in a row for Bournemouth to attempt to push out of League One, and we did, hitting the Championship for the first time since the early 80s. With success came a desire to expand, and a temporary 4th stand was erected at the south of the facility, raising the capacity to 11,700. And to christen its arrival, we even witnessed the Galacticos of Real Madrid coming to town. We played in the Championship for 2 seasons, with the average attendance at around 9,000 for our first campaign, with still a couple of thousand seats to spare. No drama. In our second season, though, we hit 5 figures for our average attendance, a number which coincided with our rather unexpected but deserved run into the Premier League. So we were promoted as champions and went up into the best league in the world. To fulfil the criteria required, Dean Court needed upgrades on lighting, media facilities, hardwiring, accessibility and much more besides. So this further decreased the capacity to a number which now stands at 11,364, but let's call it 11k from now on for the sake of argument. Promotion to the Premier League means money though, right? Surely this sudden influx of obscene amounts of cash and the sponsorship opportunities that go with it must mean that Cherries can surely have the cash to build a new facility. Well, not quite, as the ambition of the owner was to stay in the league and avoid the yo-yo tag, which we did for a number of years, with significant player investment and competitive wages which ensured our stars didn't end up going elsewhere. It's often forgotten that our salary bill in the Premier League was very close to the 70% of operating income, which is often quoted as a sustainable level. Ours was actually 73%. So as a result of the investment on the playing side, there was no second season syndrome like many newly promoted clubs have often had. On the contrary, we finished 9th in the Premier League. 9th. So our stay in the top flight, it wasn't a fluke. But what happens when you get a relatively successful football team? People want to watch them. Therefore, the Cherries fan base was increasing and we were starting to sell out games week in, week out. A stadium that sells out? The dream! But with that came some hypothetical questions. So, how many tickets could we sell if we had a larger stadium on a match day? Well, of course, it varies depending on the opposition, but some experts believe that we could get 20,000 fans in for most games if we had the capacity. So the question remains, why don't we just build it? Well, firstly, let's look at the numbers. Premier League promotion means the club will stand to gain around £115 million per season. And add to that the extra revenue we get through hospitality, sponsorship, events and retail. You're looking at a rather large sum of money. For Bournemouth, we make about £250,000 in matchday revenue per game. So with 11k seats, that equates to about £5 million per season. For the sake of argument, if we had a stadium double the size, this could be around £10 million. A basic calculation and perhaps optimistic, but it's one that exemplifies that even if we had a stadium double the capacity, the matchday revenue would still only be a drop in the ocean compared to the TV sums that we attain. But there has to be something tangible gained from this Premier League era though, right? We can't stand still like this. Look at other clubs. How have they managed to build these beautiful stadiums? And why have Bournemouth stood still? Why do we just have automated turnstiles, a lick of paint and another scoreboard by the North Stand to show after our Premier League stint? Is that the legacy? Why haven't we built it? Well, we've got to look at a few things. Firstly, the cost to buy the stadium back would currently be more than the entire season's matchday revenue that we generate, possibly even double that. But surely we can afford this. We've got a rich owner. We get loads of TV money in. Why don't we just buy it back and get developing something? Or at least extend the current facility? Well, it's not that easy. In the football ecosystem, Bournemouth are still a small club and are very vulnerable. A team our size is expected to be in and around the relegation zone in the top flight for every season that we're in it, and we cannot ever presume that we will be safe like some can. Our forecasts are constantly changing, and whilst a selection of Premier League clubs have the security that top flight football will be around the corner for the following season, Bournemouth just don't have that luxury, so it poses a massive risk. Relegation also means an inevitable drop in match-going fans. For example, Huddersfield Town registered an average of 24,000 fans in the Premier League and went down to 17,000 in the Championship. That's a percentage decrease of footfall of around 30%. Not only that, TV cash significantly goes down. And whilst parachute payments soften the blow to allow Premier League sides to adjust to second-tier life, it means any decisions on infrastructure need to be carefully thought out. Even in the Premier League, where money seemingly grew on trees, the balance between incomings and outgoings for AFC Bournemouth were finely balanced due to our desire to compete on the pitch. We weren't rolling in money. We spent what we had and occasionally what we didn't have by the way of loans from our owner. So as it stands, the owner, Maxim Demin, is already over £160 million into the club, and whilst this could be seen as a devastating blow to the outsider, Max shows no sign of wanting his cash back anytime soon. The strong belief is that the liquid assets on the pitch, i.e. the players, are a good way to hedge any large financial risks such as relegation, and we've just seen how good a strategy that is in the recent past. Recruitment on the whole is successful, and we've shifted many of our players for often double than what we paid for them. The recruitment team has cleared around £40 million in cash on all disposals during Max's ownership, including supposed failures and free transfers. So, in many ways, we're in a very sound financial position. But let's talk about the price of developing a stadium, notably extending our current facility. Well, proximity to housing and other factors mean that the local council have placed a 15,000 limit on any extension of Dean Court. We'd have to move and rebuild if we wanted to get anything bigger. Back in 2016, there was a public exhibition displaying proposed developments to the Vitality Stadium. This would have taken the capacity to 14,500. These, sadly, never happened. This idea was short-lived, and there's reason for that. So stadium or development costs are anywhere between £2,000 and £3,000 per seat based on recent stadia builds. So using those numbers to expand Dean Court to 15,000 would cost around 9 to 10 million. That's an estimated £8 million to buy back the ground, if we're lucky, plus the £1 to £2 million build cost. All conservative estimates. The extra 4,000 seats adds only £1.5 million per year in revenue. Taking out running costs, that gives an 8-year payback and an asset of limited value, as we cannot do anything else with the stadium after that. Compare that with building a new stadium with 30,000 seats at a cost of £90 million, where matchday revenue would be around £15 million. Taking out running costs, the payback would be around 10 years and would be a huge asset on the books. This, of course, all assumes that we can fill a 30,000 stadium. So expansion's not really worth it, but relocating, however, could be. But where can we relocate to? Well, there have been lots of locations suggested over the years, and one of the most favoured places is metres away. One idea floated about was to move a nearby athletics track to the site at Dean Court and build a stadium where the track currently is now. However, recently the track has actually been refurbished, so it's still unclear whether this is even still possible. In many ways, it would be ideal, as we'd still be in our spiritual home of Kings Park, but just a little bit to the southeast of where we are now. For argument's sake, we'll roll with that hypothesis and say that this location is where we want to build the new stadium. But hang on, that's where our current training facility is, right? Right next to the stadium. What are we going to do with that? So yeah, it looks like we'd need to relocate the training facility first before we build a new stadium. Actually, when you think about it, regardless of the final site of the stadium, whether it's Kings Park or elsewhere, a training facility for the long-term infrastructure of the club, enabling them to create a tangible legacy and a chance to grow and nurture talent like the likes of Gav Kilkenny, Jordan Zamora, etc. Surely that should be the preferred option anyway, right? Well, that's what the clubs seemingly think too, because you can invest in players via shrewd acquisitions or develop them yourself through a world-class academy with a chance to utilise these assets and or sell them on for large sums of cash, whereas a bigger ground will neither help the team stay in the Premier League nor will it have any resale value. Plus, people often also forget that the training facility is the daily place of work for the coaching staff, players and the academy. It is the major infrastructure attraction for players and coaches, not the stadium. It could be built out in stages and doesn't have to be the Tracy Island that was envisaged originally. When that is built, the club would have a sizable asset on its books, and it will be an asset. Whilst a training ground like a stadium won't have any major resale value, it is what's developed within it that's the golden ticket. With the likes of Mark Travers, Sam Surridge and Jayden Anthony emerging from the academy with flying colours, the evidence is there to suggest that a Cat 2 training facility is a good place to invest. So, a new training ground it is. So where are we at with it? Well, AFC Bournemouth a number of years ago earmarked a site in Camford Magna. It's an area which is over 5 miles away to the northwest of the current stadium, and they bought the land for just under £4 million. The project, which was the dream of then boss Eddie Howe, was going to be the home of the Cherries for all ages, from the youth, the academy, the development squad, all the way through to the first team. It would boast facilities superior to the notorious Marchwood training centre that Southampton have developed, and it was to feature indoor pitches, lots of outdoor pitches, state-of-the-art facilities, and also goalkeeper training areas and lots more besides. We bought it, and we even started groundworks on the project, but COVID happened. And then relegation happened, and a facility that was due to cost £35 million was understandably stopped, and it was left in limbo whilst the club had to manage an unprecedented financial crisis which sent shockwaves around the world. So what's happening with that project now? Now that we're promoted, surely we can recommence work. Well, we don't know, but meetings will be taking place in future between various organisations such as Cherries Trust and the Supporter Experience Group to find out the very latest. In the last meeting, Chief Executive Neil Blake explained that the training ground project continues to be on the agenda for the club. However, there is no further development on this currently. Whilst some see it as a project that's being mothballed, the fact that the land has been retained and not sold probably indicates that there is intention there for the club to do something with it. So we're all waiting on that. So the hope is that when the facility at Camford Magnet is developed to a point that the current facilities can be repurposed, a stadium discussion might then take place. But until then, any talk of a new ground will lie low. If we did manage to stay in the Premier League, the more years we're in it, the more chance there is of the new stadium being a thing. But we'd need to be in a financially secure position where relegation wasn't such a factor. At the moment, we cannot possibly say that staying up can be relied upon. If anything, you could say that the club are being responsible with their money, which is one of the historical criticisms. Therefore, for that reason, perhaps they deserve some credit for that. But how did other clubs do it? Swansea built a new stadium. So did Huddersfield. How did they afford it? Their money didn't just grow on trees. Well, in Swansea's case, it's now owned by the football club, but it was built on land leased cheaply from the council. And Huddersfield Stadium, well, that's just a joint venture owned by the football club, the council, and also the rugby league club. Which begs the question, would BCP Council get involved in something like this? Well, perhaps. If the stadium was seen as part of a wider regeneration scheme, then the council usually supports it, like Brentford and the aforementioned Swansea. Alternatively, if the council had an appetite for big infrastructure projects to create future rental streams, it might be interested. However, it has already signalled its intent to redevelop other projects in town. Therefore, I imagine that the football club is probably some way down its pecking order. Similarly, if it is built in an area not part of a marginal seat where it could swing votes, then maybe it would be an option too. However, Bournemouth East, while traditionally Tory, is an area which the electoral calculus suggests is swinging increasingly towards Labour. Would it be a vote-losing decision? What about a private investor? Well, that revolves around a number of factors, including finding someone prepared to fund the build themselves by lending close to £100 million to a club that is a fairly high-risk investment right now. Or it needs someone who is prepared to underwrite a very large loan and rely on cash flows from the football side to service the loan, like, for instance, Tottenham Hotspur. The downside of the latter, of course, is that it assumes that the club would generate enough cash from its operations for the repayments. But the only way that will happen is if we stay in the Premier League. It's a risky strategy. So, where does that leave us? Well, I think we can safely say that the idea of a new stadium is considered a risk to the hierarchy at AFC Bournemouth, and despite the club's riches behind the scenes, it might be a risk too far. Whereas a training ground, not so much. One must come before the other though, and it makes no sense to develop a stadium before a training ground, not just for logistical reasons. The owner of AFC Bournemouth, Maxim Demin, has been clear what the strategic priorities are, and the playing side takes preference, both in terms of acquiring the players, but also aiding their development via a state-of-the-art training ground. It's a long-term strategy, and one which possibly doesn't mimic the instant success we all experienced in the middle of the last decade. But based on the fact that the owner continually demonstrates that he's willing to hang around, it's something that, whilst it's frustrating for fans and potential fans of the future, it doesn't look likely anytime soon. Therefore, as fans, we sadly just need to put up with the jibes on social media, but at least you've got this video to point them to, right? I suppose the sad part of this tale is that the fans of the future might not be able to get tickets, and we could potentially miss out on a lifetime of revenue to that lot up the road. But given that our stadium often had seats available during our recent championship campaign, and those fans of the future with nowhere to be seen, maybe, just maybe, their thirst for watching Bournemouth is actually not intense as first thought, and perhaps they just want to see Premier League stars from Manchester and Liverpool strutting around a football pitch. Cue rolling eyes emoji. Are those the type of supporters we want anyway? Nah. For now, it's small, it's perfectly formed, and it's our home. When we're up against it, the siege mentality on the pitch resonates with the supporters, and it creates this little cauldron of noise that has inspired and will inspire some famous and very unexpected results. So let's just hope that the decibel level will be as high for the forthcoming season, where we'll do it all again. We can't wait.